Well, kudos to Mark Cerny and everybody at the PlayStation team for somehow convincing millions of people that an SSD does something that it doesn't do. Let's talk about this.
Mistakes were definitely made.
Slim!
Y'all know what day it is? It's bath day.
Hey everybody, what is going on? Brandon here with another video, this time talking about the PlayStation 5 and its magical SSD, or so its community would be led to believe. Before we get started, this video is brought to you by Above Average Customs, custom PCs that mean more bang for less bang. Check out the website link down below, fill out a free form requesting a quote, and a customer service representative will be in touch to try to get you your dream machine for less than the competitors. Also, use coupon code AverageGamer to get 15% off and free shipping on your order. Now, I do want to preface this video and say, before anybody jumps into the comments calling me a Sony hater, that if you go through my channel and see, I actually cover Sony stuff quite a bit. I don't hate Sony. This isn't a me against Sony thing, even though I'm not a very big fan of their anti-consumer practices, but I cannot stand misinformation, and I cannot stand fanboyism. So, with what Mark Cerny and PlayStation have done with their whole community, I decided to go ahead, do a video, jump ahead of this, and kind of just give my thoughts on everything that's going on. So it's been a while now since the tech presentation for PlayStation 5 where Mark Cerny came on stage and pretty much said this for what felt like forever.
With an SSD though, the SSD is very close to being like more RAM. You can just load it from the SSD. The SSD reduces the need. So back to the dream of the SSD. More game on the disk and more game.
So I'm sure you've heard by now that the PlayStation 5 has a magical SSD, an SSD so powerful and so above anything we've ever had before that it's going to help render frames, it's going to help make up for the lack of compute power between the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X, and it's going to blow away even the highest end PCs. I'm sure you've heard this going around by now. If you haven't, I'd be shocked because the PlayStation community is pretty much up in arms, screaming this from the rooftops on every form of social media, and they have been for several weeks. And it's kind of humorous to watch, but at the same time, it's also very aggravating because, like I said at the beginning of the video, I really hate misinformation. But before I get into what all is wrong about all this misinformation with the PlayStation 5's SSD, I'm going to talk about what is right about it. What they've not lied about, they've not made anything up, and that is, yes, the PlayStation 5 is getting a really fast solid-state drive. That's not a lie, that's not misinformation, it really is. But the fact that they're saying that, oh, well, this is higher end than any other solid-state drive that exists on PC, that part right there, that's not exactly 100% true. There are faster solid-state drives on PC, they just require more overhead and more money. They're very expensive, they're not affordable really whatsoever. I just dropped $200 on an MP600, which is 5 gigabits per second, whereas the PlayStation 5 is 5.5, so it's just a little bit slower than the PlayStation 5 SSD, but it was $200, so it was pretty pricey, especially seeing as how the cost of the rest of the things in the PC. So make no mistake about it, what the PlayStation 5 is doing is way more cost effective than what the PC's doing. Well, that is, unless they come out and say the PlayStation 5 is going to be $1,200, but I don't see that happening. So yes, it is more cost effective than what you can do on PC. That does not mean that a PC is not capable of the same thing. It just means you're going to spend more money, you're going to have a lot more overhead, and it just might not be worth it if you're looking for a cost-effective option for gaming. Now, if you're a hardcore tech enthusiast, PC is obviously the way to go. But if you're just looking for the most cost-effective solution, the PlayStation 5 is the route to go when it comes to the SSD. So yeah, for the most part, this information's been accurate. It's not been really a lie. There's been a little bit of misdirection, especially with Tim Sweeney coming out and saying, oh, well, the PlayStation 5's SSD is faster than most high-end PCs. That's subjective. It really depends on what his criteria is for high-end PCs. If somebody's dumped $3,000 into their PC and they got 4 MP600s ran in RAID, guess what? It's not going to outperform that PC. It's just not going to happen. But that's pretty much where the factual information stopped. It's been like a game of telephone, especially after Tim Sweeney came out with the Unreal Engine 5 demo, and after everything that Mark Cerny had said, a lot of misinformation, mostly, like I said, because it's like a game of telephone. One person's seeing something or reading something, and then they're taking their spin on it, and they're telling somebody else, then they're telling somebody else, and then before you know it, the PlayStation 5 is running RDNA 3.0 again. So a lot of misinformation, and this has been going on between Xbox Series X, Project Scarlet, Project Lockhart, the Switch, that we were supposed to be getting another version of the Switch, and then the PlayStation 5. I mean, when it comes to the console wars, misinformation happens all the time. But I figured it's time to explain to some people why they need to curb their expectations a little bit. So with that being said, let's get into all the false information that's going around. And the biggest and most important one is how an SSD functions. Those of you thinking that the SSD is going to help render frames or is going to help take off the load of the GPU in the PlayStation 5, I've got some bad news for you. That is not what an SSD does. That is not how it functions. The SSD itself does not handle any loading. It doesn't. That is on the GPU and the CPU. All the SSD does is send assets or unpack assets and send them from it to the GPU to be rendered. It does not do any loading itself. It is simply streaming the assets from the storage to the GPU to be rendered on screen. Now, what does this mean for games? Well, for one, load times are going to be exponentially faster because it's going to take a lot less time to get all those assets cached onto the GPU before they're displayed on screen. So that part of the information is actually accurate. Load times will be improved. But what about in-game? What kind of performance are we going to get in-game? Well, honestly, probably not much. Because what most people fail to understand is how massive of a jump this is. Devs for the last 20 years have been optimizing games around 100 megabits per second. We're going from that to 5.5 gigabits per second. That is a 550% increase in performance. And we've not had any games that need more than that. The only game right now that I know that's been out for a little while now in alpha that even remotely takes over 100 megabits per second is Star Citizen. And I was still able to run it perfectly fine on a 550 megabit per second Vertex 2 drive that I got back in 2013. So the idea that a bunch of devs that have been working on games and optimizing them around 100 megabits per second drives are all of a sudden going to go ahead and start optimizing all of their games around 5.5 gigabit per second NVMEs is just unrealistic. It's not going to happen very soon. Sure, we will start seeing little steps forward, moving forward through next generation, and by the end of next generation we will probably have at least a couple games that do fully take advantage of that technology. But you're not going to see a bunch, especially from third party, because third-party developers are going to be developing for the lowest common denominator. You've got the Xbox Series X that's got 2.4 gigabit per second NVMe, and then you got the PlayStation 5 that has the 5.5. They're not going to optimize their game around the highest one being the PlayStation 5's read-write, because then it would cause glitches on the Xbox and the PC versions of the game. And not very many PC users have drives that fast. The most common drive available right now is still 100 megabit per second mechanical. It's not an NVMe. Most people don't have them. So they're not going to be optimizing games to only run off them, otherwise they're limiting their player base. Next bit of misinformation, that the SSD in the PlayStation 5 is going to make up for the lack of compute power that it has against the Xbox Series X. Again, false. That's not how an SSD works. There's no way in hell that an SSD can make up for lack of compute power. They are entirely different things. An SSD is not a GPU. An SSD is not a CPU. It doesn't do any logic, it doesn't do any compute, it does nothing. It is simply a storage device that streams the assets and pushes them to the GPU or CPU. It does not do any compute whatsoever. And the best analogy I can use to explain this to get anybody who might not have any kind of computer science background to understand how exactly all this works, and this is the easiest, most simplest way I found to explain it to people that gets them to understand, is to think of the image on screen as a puzzle. The image on screen is a puzzle that needs put together. The APU, or CPU/GPU in this case, has to put the puzzle together. It is its job to put the image on the screen and to get it all put together in a timely manner. The SSD in this case is a helper, somebody sitting next to the person solving the puzzle and handing them puzzle pieces. So in theory, yes, the faster that the person hands the puzzle solver the pieces, the faster they could solve the puzzle. But it's still up to the solver to actually solve the puzzle. And I don't know how many of you are actually paying attention to the footage on screen, but if you are, awesome, because this footage was actually done to prove this point. Right now, there are no games that take advantage of NVMEs besides load times. They just really don't. Nothing is optimized around them yet, and nothing probably will be for a while. This footage right here was recorded using a 7200 RPM Western Digital Black hard drive. just a regular mechanical hard drive that most games are optimized around. This footage here was done using a 3.4 gigabit per second NVMe from Sabrent. Virtually no difference. There is almost no difference whatsoever in gameplay. The only real benefit was load times, so I don't really see any games taking advantage of these huge speeds yet. Maybe closer to the end of the console's life cycle we'll start really seeing it, but right now I just don't. We've had SSDs for a while now, we've had NVMEs for a while now, and they've not taken off quite yet. And yes, this is a step in the right direction for them to take off. But if you're thinking that when the PlayStation 5 launches, we're going to get this huge next-gen looking game that's going to blow everybody's socks off and is going to completely make up for lack of compute because of this SSD, I'm sorry, but you're going to be disappointed. That's not how they work, and that's not where we are right now. So yeah, at the end of the day, the PlayStation 5 SSD is a good step forward. It is going to push the industry forward, but not in the way everybody thinks, and it's not going to be overnight. We really won't start seeing big advantages with these SSDs for a while. We might start seeing some first-party titles take advantage of it within the first 5 years, but really, they're probably not going to be taking full advantage of it, and we won't have anything to compare it to even say, well, look how much better it performs on this versus this, and it's because of the SSD. We're not going to be able to do that, so there's really no point in fighting about it. But at the end of the day, if you think that the SSD is going to make up for the lack of compute, that's not how they work. They don't have any logic cores, they don't do any compute, they don't do any of that. All they do is stream assets to the GPU. That's it. They are not doing any actual, they're not rendering frames. The SSD is not going to render frames. So whoever keeps spreading that, stop. Just please stop. If you want, go get an A+ certification, come back, join on the conversation then. But right now, don't take your 5 years of Twitter schooling in the art of computer science as fact. Because sorry guys, you're going to be very disappointed if you think that the SSD is going to make up for lack of GPU power. It's not going to happen. That's not what they're made for. But guys, that's all the time I got for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you like this video and you want to see more, please do us a favor and hit that red subscribe button. If you want to know anytime Nathan or I upload videos, please do us a favor and ding that bell icon so we'll be sure YouTube sends you notifications out. But thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you guys next time. Hey guys, hope you enjoyed the video. If you like it, please do us a favor and mash that thumbs up button. Unless, of course, you're one of the easily offended snowflakes and you've already mashed that dislike button. I know you did. Anyway, check out some of our stuff over on the left. Check out some of our links down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you guys next time.